السابقون الأولون من المهاجرين والأنصار والذين اتبعوهم بإحسان.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. أما بعد. So we're in the section regarding the Shia, and we were looking at some of their misguidances, and that is the final section we have left on them, just to go through a list of the main misguidances of the Shia. So the first one here then today, دعوى الروافض الوحي إلى أئمتهم. The Rafida, they claim that their Imams receive revelation. They claim that their Imams receive revelation. من افتراءات الروافض وكذبهم أنهم يزعمون أن أئمتهم يوحى إليهم. So from the fabrications and the lies of the Rafida is their claim that their Imams receive revelation. And so they narrate all types of things, false narrations and fabricated narrations to support this idea that their Imams receive revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They mention a narration where they say سألت أو زرارة ابن عأين قال سألت جعفر عن قوله تعالى وكان رسولا نبيا. He said, I asked Ja'far about the statement, and he was a messenger, a prophet. كان رسولا نبيا. He said, Mar Rasul. In the narration he says that he asks him, what is a messenger? وَمَن Nabi, and what is a prophet? قال, he said, النبي الذي يرى في منامه ويسمع الصوت ولا يعاين الملك والرسول الذي يسمع الصوت ويرى في المنام ويعاين الملك. He said, قلت الإمام ما منزلته؟ قال يسمع الصوت ولا يرى ولا يعاين الملك. ثم تلا هذه الآية قال تعالى الآخرة فما متاع الحياة الدنيا في الآخرة. They say in this narration he asks, who is a prophet, who is a messenger? He tells him that a prophet is someone who sees in his dream and hears the voice but does not see, in reference to Allah. That he does not see but he hears and sees in his dream. But the messenger is the one who hears and sees and also physically sees, not just in his dream. And then they go on to talk about what is the Imam and what is the status of the Imam, that he is the one who can also see and hear but not physically. So basically the point of the narration is the status of an Imam according to them is the same as the status of a prophet. The definition they give of a prophet is the same definition they give of an Imam, meaning that he gets revelation just as the prophets they used to get revelation. فَيَعْتَقِدُونَ أَنَّ أَئِمَّتَهُمْ لَهُمْ مَكَانَةً فَوْقَ الْأَنْبِيَاءِ. To the extent they even believe that their Imams have a position and status higher than the prophets. So they have an extreme misguidance when it comes to their Imams, believing that their Imams receive revelation, believing that some of their Imams are even superior and higher in rank and status than the prophets themselves. Also, from their misguidances is that they believe their imams are infallible. Their imams cannot err. دعوى الروافض عصمة أئمتهم. That their imams are infallible, they cannot err, they cannot fall into any error. الروافض يزعمون أن أئمتهم معصومون. So they believe that their imams are infallible. And they say that because they say العصمة لأنه حافظ للشرع قائم به فحاله كحال النبي. They say their imams, they are the guardians of the Sharia. They are the guardians of the Sharia, upholding the Sharia in the same way as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was infallible when it came to falling into shirk or falling into major sins. He was protected from those affairs. And they say their imams, their role and responsibility is just like that of a prophet. And therefore, just like the prophets have a level of ismah, protection from ever falling into shirk or major sins, etc., then likewise they say our imams have that same status as the prophets. Also, from the major claims of the Rafidah, from the major misguidances they have, ادعاؤهم تحريف القرآن الكريم. They claim that the Quran has been distorted. The claim of the Rafidah that the Quran has been distorted and changed. من الطامات الكبرى والبلايا العظمى قول الروافض أن القرآن الكريم الموجود بين يدي المسلمين محرف. From the biggest of the calamities and the worst of the misguidances of the Rafidah is that they claim the Quran that we have in the Mus'haf that we have, this is distorted and it is not the original Quran. وَأَنَّهُ قَدْ حُذِفَ مِنْهُ آيَاتٍ كَثِيرًا. And they claim that many parts of the Quran, many verses, many ayat have been erased from the Quran, so that we don't have the original actual Quran. It's distorted, changed, with bits missing from it, they claim. They narrate in one of their books, they narrate إن القرآن الذي جاء به جبريل عليه السلام إلى محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم 17,000 آية. They say the Quran that was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the Quran that Jibreel came with, was 17,000 ayahs. They say it was 17,000 ayahs. ومن المعلوم أن القرآن الكريم يحتوي على 6,263 آية فقط. However, it is known that the Quran actually has how many ayahs? 63. 6,263. That is the actual number. But they claim it was 17,000. So according to them, 2/3 of the Quran is missing. According to them, 2/3 of the Quran is missing. They say there were 17,000 ayahs. But we know there's only 6,263. So they claim 2/3 of the Quran is missing. In another narration, they say, Inna indana la mushaf Fatima. They say, we have the mushaf of Fatima. وَمَا يُدْرِيهِمْ مَا مُصْحَفُ فَاطِمَةٍ. And how will they recognize or come to understand what is the mushaf of Fatima? مُصْحَفٌ فِيهِ قُرْآنُكُمْ ثَلَاثَ مَرَّاتٍ. They say it's a mushaf that has 3 times the Quran you have. 3 times, because they say there are 2/3 missing at that end, and it becomes like 3 times what you have. وَاللَّهِ مَا فِيهِ مِنْ قُرْآنِكُمْ حَرْفٌ وَاحِدٌ. And it's mentioned, they say that by Allah there is not in your Quran a single word, meaning they are belittling what is actually there, claiming that the real Quran, the mushaf, the version they have is 3 times what you have. 2/3 more are in that which are missing from the mushaf that you have. This is their claim, and that is one of their biggest misguided claims, that we do not have the original Quran. The original Quran is no longer here, 2/3 of it are missing. How do we refute this? This is one of their major claims, and it can be refuted by the evidences. Firstly, from the Quran itself. From the Quran itself it can be refuted. لا شك أن من اعتقد أن كتاب الله القرآن الكريم محرف فهو كافر خارج من الإسلام. Firstly, a person who believes that the Quran is distorted, it's missing and it's changed and we don't have the actual Quran anymore. A person who believes that about the Quran, then that individual is a disbeliever. That is a kafir. The one who says we don't have the Quran, it's changed, it's gone, it's distorted. Why? Because they are denying the verses of the Quran. Allah tells us in the Quran itself that the Quran will be preserved. Inna nahnu nazzalna dhikra wa inna lahu lahafidhun. That indeed we have revealed a dhikr, meaning this Quran. وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. And we will preserve it. We will guard over it, meaning Allah. Allah is saying, I will preserve it and guard over it. So if Allah is telling us in the Quran that He will preserve the Quran and He will guard over the Quran, if somebody now comes along and says the Quran has not been preserved, it's not being guarded, it has been distorted and changed and gone, then he is denying this ayah in the Quran, denying where Allah says He will make sure the Quran is preserved. And now the person comes along, the Rafidi comes along and says, no, the Quran was not preserved. He's denying and rejecting this ayah, rejecting that Allah will preserve the Quran as Allah told us Himself He will do. That is a clear refutation of them. Secondly, another refutation upon them. ما فائدة هذا المصحف الذي يدعون فهو لا يعمل به ولم يقرأه أحد وفي زعمهم أنه لا يظهر إلا مع المهدي في آخر الزمان فما قيمته وما فائدته. That version that they claim is the actual Quran with 17,000 verses in it, 3 times the size of what we have now. They actually say that version of the Quran isn't here right now. And it's only going to come at the end of time with the Mahdi. So if that's the case, that the actual Quran, as they claim, isn't actually here and we don't have access to it yet, and we're only going to get access to it at the end of time when the Mahdi comes with it, then what is the purpose of that Quran? We don't have access to it. We can't read it. We can't memorize it. These other 2/3 that are apparently in there. Nobody can see them. Nobody can read them. Nobody can memorize them. Nobody can act upon them because we don't have them. According to them, it's only going to come at the end of time. Then what is the purpose of that Quran of theirs as they claim? The whole purpose of the Quran, Allah sent it as a guidance for us to learn it, to memorize it, to understand it. So if it is hidden from us and it's only going to come at the end of time, then what is the purpose of it? Nobody can read it or memorize it or understand it or practice it. So this is another refutation upon them. And what do you mean the Quran is actually 17,000 verses if nobody can actually see what's in those verses, hidden and unknown? Then what's the purpose of that? So that is another refutation upon them on this claim that Allah sent down 17,000 verses of the Quran to us. And of course we know أن هذه الدعوة أن مصحفهم لدى المهدي المزعوم هي دعوة كاذبة يريدون أن يستروا بها كذبهم لأنهم لا يستطيعون أن يفتروا مصحفا على الكيفية التي قالوا. So this story of theirs, that the full version of the Quran, the 17,000 verses, is with the Mahdi. We don't have it. It's with the Mahdi. It's going to come at the end of time. That is a fabrication and a lie. And the reason they have fabricated that lie is because they have no choice. They cannot produce a Quran of 17,000 verses. They cannot write 12,000 verses or 11,000 verses comparable to the actual Quran. Allah tells us in the Quran, bring one ayah like it if you can. They are not going to bring 12,000 or 11,000 ayahs like it. Impossible, they can't do it. So they know they cannot fabricate a copy and say this is the full version. They know they cannot, impossible, incapable. That challenge Allah placed it on mankind. And that challenge will remain up until the day of judgment. Bring an ayah like it if you can. And they cannot, impossible. So if they cannot fabricate some fake version, and they cannot, then the only other way to get around it is to say, no, it exists, but we don't have it, the Mahdi has it. And the Mahdi is going to bring it. Because that is the only way to cover themselves. If somebody says, okay, it's 18,000, 17,000 verses, let's see, let's read the other parts. They cannot produce anything, so they make up this lie, we don't have it, it's with the Mahdi, he's going to bring it. It's all a fabrication and a lie without a scrap of evidence behind it. So Allah Azza wa Jal تحدى الجن والإنس أن يأتوا بسورة مثل القرآن فضلا عن أن يأتوا بثلاثة أمثال القرآن. So Allah has challenged us to bring even one chapter like the Quran, let alone to bring 2/3 more resembling the Quran. فهذا من الكذب الواضح. So that is clear fabrication and lies from the Rafida. وهم يريدون أن يستروا هذه الكذبة فيدعون أنه لدى مهديهم. So the reason why they say that is simply to conceal this lie of theirs, this fabrication that the Quran is actually 17,000 verses. Also from the claims or from the refutations we can make upon them regarding this claim of the Quran being 17,000 verses in reality, يزعم الروافض أن مصحفهم لدى علي بن أبي طالب رضي الله عنه وهذه كذبة مكشوفة لأنه لو كان لدى علي رضي الله عنه مصحف خاص غير ما عند المسلمين فإن الواجب عليه إظهاره. They say that Ali radiallahu anhu had the full mushaf. He had a copy of the full mushaf, they say. This is also a refutation upon them. Because if Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu had a copy of this so-called full mushaf of 17,000 verses, then he would not have concealed it. If he had a copy of that, it would have been widespread. He would have taught all of his students, and they would have taught their students. We would have had a chain of narration right now, just as we have for the Quran. Chains of narration right now, from the student learnt it from his teacher, from his teacher, from his teacher, back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Nothing like that exists. So they must either then claim that Ali radiallahu anhu concealed the Quran. He hid the Quran, which becomes contradictory. It becomes contradictory because one of their other claims is that Abu Bakr and Umar hid the other 2/3 of the Quran. Some of them, they claim Abu Bakr and Umar radiallahu anhuma got the other 2/3 and hid those 2/3 and only gave the people these 6,000 verses. They concealed the other 11,000 verses. Because they say those other 11,000 verses, they were all about the praise of Ali radiallahu anhu. And Abu Bakr and Umar radiallahu anhuma didn't like that. So those 2/3 of the Quran, they concealed it. Because the first person to collect all of the Quran in history was Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq was the first one to collect and gather all of the Quran. When the battle was occurring against Musaylama al-Kadhdhab, the battle of al-Yamama, and many of the huffaz of the Quran, many of the memorizers were being killed in that battle. So Umar ibn al-Khattab came to Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anhu, who was the Khalifa now, and came to him and said to him, many of the memorizers of the Quran are dying. We should collect all of the Quran, go get it from them now, write it down in case they all die, the ones who have memorized it. At first Abu Bakr was not in agreement, because the Messenger had never written it all down into one book. It was never written down, all of it, into one book at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. All the companions, they had the parts. Some companions had written down maybe Surah Al-Baqarah, another companion written down Surah Al-Imran, An-Nisa. They had written parts, but nobody had written a full copy from beginning to end, everything. The companions only had sections each. They had memorized the full Quran. Many of them had memorized the full Quran, but nobody had written down the full Quran. They had only written down parts. Some of them Baqarah, some of them Ali Imran, some of them Juz Amma, or Juz Amma we say now. In the time of the companions, they didn't have 30 Juz. At the time of the companions, they had how many Juz? The Juz, that's not part of the revelation as Juz. That's, the scholars, they made the Juz, 30 Juz, to make it easy to memorize. At the time of the companions, they used to recognize the Quran as how many Juz? They used to recognize it as 7 juz. The way they used to look at the Quran, they used to recognize it as 7 juz, because it was common practice for them to finish a 7th of the Quran every day. Common practice. 7th of the Quran, and some of them even more than that. But a common practice, at least they would finish the recitation of the whole Quran in a week. And so the way they used to think about it was 7 parts. Read 1 part on the first day, 1 part on the second day, 3rd day, 4th day, 7 days, 7 parts, like 7 juz. Now, of course, it's been organized into 30 juz to make it easy to memorize. So, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq originally wasn't in agreement, because nobody at the time of the companions had done that. Nobody had written down all of it from beginning to end. But then in the end, Umar ibn al-Khattab, when he explained the situation, then they were in agreement. And they called Zayd ibn Thabit, and they told him to go do it. Even he initially wasn't sure about that, but then he was convinced, and all of them were in agreement, this needs to be done. And so the Quran was gathered, Zayd ibn Thabit, and there were 3 others with him, 4 of them from the Kuttab al-Wahi. Because when the revelation used to come down, there were a number of companions known as the Kuttab al-Wahi, the writers of the revelation. When new parts of the Quran used to be revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he would teach them, there were specific companions. They would come and they would write it down. Specific companions known as the writers of the Quran. The writers of the Quran, the recorders of the Quran. They used to come and write. But there were maybe 30, 40 of them. So not every single one used to come and write every single time. And that's why some of them had some parts and some of them had other parts. So Zayd ibn Thabit went to all of them and he gathered everything each one of them had until he had written down the full Quran. So that was at the time of Abu Bakr. Then afterwards, at the time of Uthman, the reason why it was gathered again, Uthman radiallahu anhu gathered the Quran again at his time. And the reason why it was done at that time was because at the time of Uthman, people had started to differ over the qira'at, the recitations. They had started to differ over the recitations. This one saying, no, you recite it like this. The other one saying, no, it's like this. And all of those recitations are valid, but they began to differ over the recitations. So Uthman gathered all of the Quran into that one recitation, the famous one now you have, Hafs. Everybody recites. That is they call it the Mushaf Uthmani. That is the one. He collected it all into that recitation. And at that time, that was the one then to be used. And that was the one spread. A copy to Sham, a copy to Egypt, a copy in Mecca, a copy in Medina, a copy in Iraq. They sent these copies of that version in order so that the people would not differ anymore. This is recited like this. There's the copy, no differing over this ayah, this word, that word. So it was gathered for that purpose at that time. So the point we were coming to was that Abu Bakr and Umar radiyallahu anhuma, they claim, or the Rafida claim, that Abu Bakr and Umar, they concealed 2/3 of the Quran. So perhaps in history and tariq, if they join that together and they say Abu Bakr was the first to compile it, that he hid 2/3 of it. And he only gave out the copies of 1/3 of it. So then it contradicts the claim they have also that Ali radiallahu anhu had a full copy of it. If Ali radiallahu anhu had a full copy of it, why didn't he disseminate that and spread that amongst the people everywhere? Amongst all of their followers, amongst all of the Muslims, to know that full copy. So then it contradicts themselves and they have to start claiming things like Ali concealed the Quran, and that doesn't work either, to claim that Ali concealed the Quran. So that is one of their biggest misguidances, the Rafida. Their false claims regarding the Quran. Another one of their major misguidances is their claim that the companions were or committed kufr. Their claims that the companions committed kufr. They apostated. And they then cursed the companions, believing and claiming that the companions apostated. لَقَدْ امْتَلَأَتْ قلوب الروافض غيظا على أصحاب محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم فقالوا فيهم أخبث قول وأفسد وفاقوا بذلك اليهود والنصارى خبثا. The Rafida have hearts filled with hatred against the companions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the statements that the Rafida made against the companions are even more severe than what you hear from the Jews and the Christians. The level of evilness in their statements, the disgusting nature of their statements and the types of things they say, it's even worse than the Jews and the Christians would say about the companions. فَقَدْ قِيلَ لِلْيَهُودِ مَنْ خَيْرُ أَهْلِ مِلَّتِكُمْ. There's this famous narration where it is said to the Jews, it was said to the Jews, مَنْ خَيْرُ أهل ملتكم. Who are the best of the people from your nation, from the Jews? قالوا أصحاب موسى عليه السلام. They say the companions of Moses, the companions of Musa عليه السلام are the best of this nation, of their nation. وقيل للنصارى من خير أهل ملتكم. And it was said to the Christians, who are the best of your nation? They say قالوا أصحاب عيسى عليه السلام. They say the companions of Jesus, the companions of Isa عليه السلام are the best of our nation. And then وقيل للرافضة من شر أهل ملتكم. The opposite was said to the Rafida, who are the worst of your ummah, the worst of your nation. They say قالوا أصحاب محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. They say the companions of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, they are the worst of this ummah. They are the worst. That is what they say. That is what they claim. That is the level of hatred. فالرافضة يزعمون أن الصحابة كفروا جميعا إلا نفر منهم. The Rawafid, they believe that all of the companions apostated, except a small handful that they excuse. Otherwise, all of the companions, according to the Rafida, apostated. It said in one of the narrations, كان الناس أهل ردة بعد النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم إلا ثلاثة. In one of the narrations, as an example, they say that the people after the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم died, they were all apostates. They all apostated except three. In this one version, فَقُلْتُ وَمَنِ الثَّلَاثَةِ. The narrator says, I said to him, who are the three? قال المقداد ابن الأسود أبو ذر الغفاري and Salman al-Farisi. They excuse them in one narration. In their narrations, they excuse a handful here and there, but everybody else, according to them, apostated. كما أن للروافض عليهم ما يستحقون ولع شديد إلى حد الهوس بلعن وسب شيخي الإسلام وسيدا كهول أهل الجنة صاحبي الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم أبي بكر وعمر رضي الله عنهما وأرضاهما. And from the worst of what the Rafida say is regarding the best of the companions, Abu Bakr and Umar. From the worst of what the Rafida say about the companions, it is upon Abu Bakr and Umar radiyallahu anhuma. So they say in some of their narrations, in some of their books of du'as, in some of the books of supplications that the Rafida have, one of the supplications they have in one of these books of theirs, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammadin. No problem. But then carries on the dua, wal'an صنمي قريش وجبتيهما وطاغوتيهما وابنتيهما. أعوذ بالله. They say, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad. No problem. But then they say, and, O Allah, curse the two idols of Quraysh and the two jibtayhima, again like the idols that they used to worship. Wa taghutayhima, the two taghuts amongst them. Wa ibnatayhima, and their two daughters, or cursing them and belittling them. And all of that description, they are talking about Abu Bakr and Umar. They are referring to Abu Bakr and Umar in this dua, in their books of dua. في كتب الأدعية عندهم. This is one of their du'as. A dua which begins with Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad. And then, oh Allah, curse the two idols and deities and taghuts that they had in Quraysh, meaning Abu Bakr and Umar radiyallahu anhuma. In fact, وَابْنَتَيْهِمَا, the two daughters, they mean by that وَبِالْبِنْتَيْنِ يُرِيدُونَ أُمَّهَاتِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ عَائِشَةَ وَحَفْصَةَ. So actually what they mean in this dua is Allah cursed the two idols and two deities, two taghuts, Abu Bakr and Umar, and the two daughters, the two girls, meaning Aisha and Hafsa radiyallahu anhuma, the two wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That is what they mean by this particular dua of theirs. So that is another one of their major misguidances, one of their major misguidances, to curse the companions and declare them as disbelievers. They have another narration in one of their books. They say, لِلَّهِ وَرَاءَ هَذَا الْعَالَمِ سَبْعُونَ أَلْفَ عَالَمٍ. They say in one of their narrations in another one of their books that Allah has created 70,000 other worlds like this one. 70,000 other worlds like this one. في كل عالم 70,000 أمة. And in each one of those other worlds there are 70,000 nations. Like we have here the nation of Ibrahim, the nation of Musa, the nations. 70,000 nations in each of those other 70,000 worlds. كل أمة أكثر من الإنس والجن. And all of those other nations are greater in number than the jinn and the humans we have in this population of this earth. And all of them, they have or they perform al-la'n ala Abi Bakr wa Umar. 70,000 worlds with 70,000 nations in each one, all of them bigger than the numbers of the jinn and humans, and all of them curse Abu Bakr and Umar from this world of ours. Narrations like this, and I've told you the story before that they used to tell us, one of our teachers, that they slaughter the pet of their child, hamster, rabbit, the parents come and slaughter it and leave it all bloody and cut up, and when the child comes in the morning and sees all of that animal, his pet, cut up and blood and everything, and he's crying and sobbing at losing his pet, then they say to him, our son, our daughter, that was Abu Bakr and Umar, they came and did this to your pet at night, in order to create the hatred in the hearts of the children against Abu Bakr and Umar radiyallahu anhuma. Also, just to round off on the misguidances of the Rafidah, we've touched upon some of these already. One of their misguidances is their belief that the Mahdi is Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Askari, and they say he was born around about the year 260 Hijri. Around about the year 260 Hijri. That's what they claim, and that he then went into some type of cave or tunnel, or went in and hid and is concealed, and he will exit. This is from the types of misguidances they have regarding their beliefs in the Mahdi, that he is concealed and hidden and he will exit. Also, the Rafidah in our time as well, up to our time as well. الرافضة الإمامية تزعم الآن أن أئمتهم الكبار أمثال الخميني ومن كان على شاكلته هم نواب الإمام الغائب. They believe that their big imams right now, like Al-Khomeini who's gone now, these types of imams of theirs, they believe they are the representatives of the great Imam, the Mahdi who will exit. They believe these imams are directly appointed as representatives to run the affairs for now until the great Imam exits. A few other beliefs. One of the beliefs the Rafida have is قول الروافض في الرجعة. They believe basically that people come back to life again. Some of them believe that people come back to life again. يزعم الروافض بالرجعة المراد بها عندهم رجعة كثير من الأموات إلى الحياة. They believe many dead people, deceased, come back to life. وقد نصوا على رجعة النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. And in their books it is clearly stated that they believe the messenger came back to life. After he died, he came back to life. And they specifically, explicitly mention how they believe Ali ibn Abi Talib came back to life. After he died, he came back to life. And about many of their imams, they believe they came back to life. The reality of this type of belief, the scholars have mentioned, is that حقيقة دعوى الرجعة أنها عقيدة يهودية. فإن اليهود ينكرون البعث يوم القيامة ويزعمون أن الصالحين سيقومون آخر الزمان. So this is the belief of some of the Jews, where they don't believe that there is a resurrection, and they believe instead that the righteous people are going to come back to life again. There is no resurrection, some of them believe, but that the righteous people are going to come back again. And the first person to bring out this aqidah and to spread this aqidah was Abdulla ibn Saba. Abdulla ibn Saba al-Yahudi, he is the first one, and he began claiming these types of things, and that the messenger is going to be resurrected and come back to life again now. And that's where they took those beliefs from. The last one we'll mention, the famous one, I'm sure everybody or many people are aware of it, is that the Rafida have something called, when they fake or they lie, taqiyya. And this is one of their famous types of beliefs, and they believe that this issue of basically concealing the reality and showing something different, showing something and making apparent something, whereas in reality, in your heart, you're upon something else. Hiding and concealing the reality and displaying something else. They say that's permissible. And they believe this is, it says in their books and things, this is 9/10 of their religion. 90% of their religion is based upon this taqiyya, upon concealing the reality and displaying the false display. 90% of their religion, 9/10 of their religion. فَهُوَ أَنْ يُظْهِرَ الشَّخْص خِلَافَ مَا يُبْطِنُ. And so, the reality is that it's a methodology of lying, that they conceal something and they make apparent something else. And so they believe this is permissible. They believe this is not only permissible, but it is religion. 9/10 of their religion. And that is one of their other major misguidances. That brings us to some of the major misguidances that they have. And that is just a brief overview regarding the Rafida. After that, we'll have a look at the Jahmiyyah. But we'll begin with that next time, regarding the Jahmiyyah. And these ones are very important as well, the Jahmiyyah, the Mu'tazila, these kinds of groups, because the majority of people these days now, their misguidances are these misguidances of the Jahmiyyah, the Mu'tazila, the Asha'ira. All of these people out there, they are upon these beliefs. The Asha'ira, how much fuss they make, how many claims they make against Ahlus-Sunnah, claiming they are Ahlus-Sunnah, and the majority of Muslims are Asha'ira, they say, and that is the right way. It all comes from these early groups. There were 4 original groups, and then all the other groups, they came out from them. So these Jahmiyyah, Mu'tazila, Asha'ira, it's very important to understand what their principles are, because nowadays when the people, they come and they debate you, they want to discuss something with you about Aqeedah, they are going to be upon these things, upon these principles from the Jahmiyyah, the Mu'tazila in the early days. So inshaAllah ta'ala, we'll have a look at those from next time, beginning then with the Jahmiyyah from next week inshaAllah ta'ala, how that was originally founded, who the founder was, what their principles are, what they believe in regards of names and attributes, in Iman, in the decree, their beliefs in the various principles of the religion. So we'll conclude upon that for today then. وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.